guys, so today on the PhantomCave YouTube channel, we're going to be having a look at the 6th part of the old Phantom collection. And this sort of part, it comes out of basically it's counting down the issues that I have in my old Phantom collection. And to start it off, we have the Phantom to the Rescue in issue number 833. Now these comics are they're quite old, so they're from I think near the mid 80s, and they're pretty I quite like to see how basically the old Phantom comics in cover art, in stories, always sort of appealed to younger Australians, and they sometimes even appealed to a lot of older Australians, a lot of older folk who have basically been reading the Phantom for probably 20 plus years or 30 plus years or something like that. So back in those days, you could get this actual comic for 80 cents. It's 32 pages. It's PNG, which is Papua New Guinea, is 70t, and Fiji is 70 cents. Put that over there. The next actual comic we see is the Swamp Dragon, issue number 836, and that also was 80 cents. And back in those days, we had cover artists like Tommy Hughes, who was basically doing the cover arts from, I think, the early hundreds of the early Phantoms and towards, I think, the back end of the 80s or something like that. So yeah, we had a lot of good sort of cover arts coming out, and most of the cover arts, we either had Tommy Hughes coming out with amazing artwork, or we had basically a picture from the Phantom comic inside of the script. The artworks from the script in the Phantom comic back in those days, they would put that onto the Phantom cover, and just not much sort of preparation as we see in the more modern types of Phantom comics that come out nearly every fortnight. And a lot of sort of the comics that come out every fortnight are either, I think, next week or something, there's supposed to be the second part of the Raven story, that the new Raven crossover with the Phantom is supposed to come out. That I have not seen the cover art for that yet, but I'm looking forward to reading that story, and let's carry on. We now have the 50th wife, and obviously it's gone for 80 cents back in those days. It's issue number 837. We've got, in a lot of these comics, a lot of old comics you see in especially the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and the early 90s, you would see especially a lot of the younger sort of Phantom fans back in those days. We would see a lot of kids or a lot of people trying to trace over the Phantom lines of a cover. Now that can be alright, I guess it can be alright, but from a collector's point of view, not that great. And this is actually, let me see, no, it hasn't got lines on it, so it's pretty damn good. Issue number 838, and the story is Lost on the Phantom Trail. And this is actually a news story back in the 80s. They either had reprints or they had news stories from when the new dailies and the Sundays would come out. We have another 2 stories. Now, issue number 839, we have the Great Uranium Racket and the Twin Phantoms. Again, you could get it for 80 cents, And let's just have a look to see. No, it isn't. So I'm actually looking to see if they have the lines around the faces, because more particular, you can actually see when someone's drawn on the front cover. It'll leave like a ballpoint pen marking on it, but it doesn't seem to have it on this one. One of the great things back in the mid 80s and early 90s is that you had a very special comic come out. It was unnumbered, most of them were unnumbered, and they finished back in the early 90s or something. And this one is actually one of those comics where it wasn't numbered, and a lot of the history about the unnumbered issues can go back to the late 1940s, when we had the early Phantom comics come out. We had the Phantom in the Phantom's world or something, Enter the Phantom. We had issue 1, which was Enter the Phantom. We had issue 2, which was, I think, something about Tiger, and a lot of those early sort of issues were I don't think were numbered. And yeah, I actually found this out back in probably a month or two ago, when I was actually seeing where these would go in my collection. And these actual comics would actually, it's actually part of a series where there's probably 20 odd comics. Some are numbered, some aren't, and you get probably 3 or 2 stories in each sort of comic. And this obviously started back in, I think, the mid 80s or something. And yeah, I quite like to see how they, in the old days, how they would do sort of new stories. Back, like right now, we don't actually, it's rare that we actually get to see a new story from few, or because I've actually asked Dudley myself, I've actually asked him how often do basically new stories come out, and he said not that often, and it will be more rarely that they will actually publish new stories. And so we have issue 843, the Iron Dragon. We have issue 844, the Phantom Ring. Oh, here's an example of when you get those sort of young Phantom fans back in the 80s, and you would see a ballpoint pen on a Phantom comic tracing around the lines. And yeah, that can be historical, but sometimes can basically ruin the cover. That's the same as if you would be putting price stickers on your front of the comics and still leaving them on 20 years later. So we have number 848, the Phantom and the Werewolf. Back in those days, it was $1. Really? $1 for a Phantom comic? That sounds cheap. Man, that sounds cheap in my eyes. We have 32 pages is bigger. It's a new story. It's number 850, and it's called The Floating Island. $1, hey? Yeah. $1. Can't believe it. And now we have to pay like $3.75, but it's still pretty good. If you still wanted to get Phantom comics at like $1, the few wouldn't be able to like survive a lot of things. They need to they eventually late last year they actually increased the dollar price of the Phantom comics from a news agency and it was only like 25 cents, so that's not much of a big deal. But we now have 32 pages, is bigger, and it's issue number 851 with Prince Halley and the White Stallion Part 1. So if you would like to subscribe to the PhantomCave YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Click that subscriber button down below, and as always, keep Phantom Caving, and soon there will be a new podcast coming out, The Fan number 2 coming out very, very soon, and I do have some ideas for coming up to Christmas, so stay tuned, and as always, keep Phantom Caving. We'll see